Thank you. So here we are in 2004, and Craig Strong, who was a photographer, he had gone digital, and he was bored silly with digital photography. He thought it was too perfect and too clean, and there was a lot of things that he missed about film, and he didn't want to go back to film, so he started messing around with some lenses that he had, a couple of broken lenses, a couple of different things, duct tape, and one day on a trip to Home Depot, he was inspired by vacuum cleaner hose, and he bought a length of vacuum cleaner hose and started experimenting with that, wanting to be able to move the lens around, and eventually came up with the final prototype for Lensbaby, which then kind of got developed into a repeatable product that people would actually want to put on their camera, and that was launched in February of 2004 at the WPPI show. By that point, they had a website up, and they had created a little bit of an internet buzz, and they actually had people waiting at the booth at WPPI to buy the very first generations of the original Lensbabies. So that came out in 2004. And then in 2005, we launched what was then called Lensbaby 2.0. Lensbaby 2.0 was very much like the original Lensbaby, but it had a different optic. It had the double glass optic in it, which was sharper. He also upgraded the aperture system to be magnetic. The original Lensbaby just had little, the same kind of idea with discs that drop into the front of the lens, but they were held in place by a little rubber gasket. And so you had to pull the gasket out to change the disc and put the gasket back in. So it was definitely a bit fiddly. So the Lensbaby 2.0 with the magnetic aperture system made it much easier to change your aperture. Just lift it out with a magnet, drop it in, and it would stay in. And also, the Lensbaby 2.0 had the double glass optic, which was sharper than the single glass of the original Lensbaby. And then in 2006, he answered all the questions of, I want it to lock in place, I want it to find focus, and that was when we launched Lensbaby 3G. If you remember the 3G, it had the rods that came out of it, and you would focus it in the same way by squeezing in and out, but then you could lock it in place and fine focus it. And that was our bestseller back in 2006. And then as 2008 rolled around, we came out with the Composer and the idea for the optic swap system, which is unique in any camera lens, that you can actually take the optic out of the lens and change it for a different one. So in 2008, we kind of revamped the line so that the original Lensbaby and the Lensbaby 2.0 became the Muse, and the Composer came out at that point. And then we also made the Lensbaby 3G optic swap compatible, which became the Control Freak, which is actually no longer with us. Right now we have 5 SLR bodies, and we have 8 different optics that go into the system. So when you buy a Lensbaby, it comes with an optic in it, and then you're able to take that optic out and change it for one of the others. The 8 optics are the Pinhole Zone plate, the single glass, the double glass, the plastic, the Edge 80, the Sweet 35, the soft focus, and the Fisheye. So each one of those different optics is going to give you a completely different look, and therefore it's like changing your whole lens, but you're actually just changing the inner part of your lens, the optic part. How the system works is by choosing a lens body. That body will come with an optic. You can swap that optic out, and then you can also add accessories to the optics. We have wide angle, telephoto, macro, super wide, macro converters, a variety of different accessories that can be used with each optic. These are the lenses that we have today. On the far left, you'll see the Scout, then you'll see the Spark, and then in the center, you've got the Composer Pro, and then the Muse, and then the regular Composer. And we're going to go through each one and talk about what each one does. Basically, the difference between each one, besides the optic that's installed in it when you get it, is the way that you focus it, whether it be the ball and socket focusing of the composer, or the muse and the spark, where you actually squeeze them in and out to focus them. Of all of the 8 optics that we have, 2 of them have 12 blade aperture systems built in. So you can now just turn the dial to turn the aperture, which is a relatively new feature for us. The other optics use aperture discs that drop into the lens. They come with them when you buy them. And this image will show you a little bit of how the aperture controls the effect, controls the size of your sweet spot, and how much blur you get. So our optics, Sweet 35, double glass, plastic, and single glass optics are designed to give you a sweet spot of focus and blur out the rest. And the size of that sweet spot is dependent on your aperture. So you can see on the left image there, you're getting a tiny sweet spot and a lot of blur at f2. Stopping it down, each stop is going to make that sweet spot grow and the blurring shrink. So if you look on the right side, the image at a f22, you can see that that's mostly in focus, and you're not getting very much blur around the edges. So you can choose to shoot with a tiny sweet spot and a lot of blur, or a big sweet spot and just a little bit of blur, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing a portrait of one person, you can go for a smaller sweet spot. If you wanted to fit 2 people in your portrait, you would probably want to change your aperture so that you get a bigger sweet spot, say f8, so you can fit 2 people nicely in it. Edge 80 optic is our newest optic. This one is has the 12 blade aperture system built in, which makes it very easy to change your aperture. This one is also, it's going to give you a slice of focus. So this is most like a tilt shift lens. With this one in the composer, if you shoot straight on, it's going to be more like a prime lens, no effect. It's going to be sharp from corner to corner. But tilting it is going to give you that slice of focus look, and then you can actually pull out the front on the Edge 80 and give you a closer focusing distance. So it's pretty versatile. That slice of focus look is really popular and really desirable. This optic doesn't do perspective correction like a tilt shift lens, but it's pretty close to the look of a tilt shift lens minus the perspective correction. And it's really easy to use, especially in the Composer Pro. You just move it however far you want to move it, and that's going to move that slice of focus wherever you want in the frame, up or down or side to side. You'll see the slice move around, and you can actually see it as you do it. Or you can also just shoot straight on and get a perfectly straight, sharp portrait, or whatever you're shooting. These are some sample images of Edge 80, so you can see how sharp that slice of focus is, and then the blur gradually going out to the edges. It's really popular for portraiture. It's another one. Tack sharp slice of focus. People also use it to create that kind of miniature look that you get with the tilt shift lens. That's New York. Another portrait. It's really popular with fashion photographers. It's also pretty popular with senior portrait photographers. Sweet 35 optic. This one also has the 12 blade aperture system built in. This one is going to give you a sweet spot of focus and blur out the rest. Again, with the Composer lens, you can actually move that sweet spot around and point it anywhere you want in the image. Changing the aperture is going to change the effect. You can see with this one, there's just a tiny sweet spot. The rest is blurred out. But you could open up the blades and make that sweet spot much larger and cover most of that plant there. And it also has a pretty close focusing distance. You can get about 7.5 inches with the Composer to infinity, closer in the Muse, in one of the squishy lenses that you can actually move forward and backward. You can get closer, and you can use the macro converters with it to turn it actually into a macro. Some examples of the Sweet 35. And you'll see that sweet spot is always going to be tack sharp, no matter what size the sweet spot is. It's always going to be crisp and tack sharp. And this one comes, either you can purchase it separately, or you get it in the Composer Pro Sweet 35 when you buy it. So right out of the box, you got the Sweet 35. Yep, it fits in the Composer and the Composer Pro. It fits in any optic swap system Lensbaby. Double glass optic. Now this one is the optic that comes in the Muse. It's the optic that comes in the Composer, and it's the optic that comes in the Composer Pro double glass. So a lot of people have this one right out of the box. If you start out with a different Lensbaby, you can also purchase this separately and make it part of your collection. This one is also tack sharp at every aperture. It ranges from 2.0 to f22, and this one uses the magnetic aperture disc. So this one comes with the little discs and tool, which you can get to play with later. And same idea, changing the aperture is going to change the size of your sweet spot. But with this one, it's a little bit more manual. You have to actually lift the disc out and drop the new disc in. Comparable in sharpness to the Sweet 35. Stop down, you probably find the Sweet 35 to be sharper. But double glass, it was, when it first came out, it was compared to Nikkor lenses for sharpness by reviewers. And that one I don't even think is using a macro. That was just close up. Small sweet spot on that one. Lots of blur. And again, you're able to accentuate one area of the image and blur out the rest. So it's really great for portraits because you don't even have to worry about your background. You're not even really going to see the background like in this one, depending on your aperture and the way you set your subject.
Now, how would this differ from the Sweet 35 as far as effects?
It's pretty similar in effect to the Sweet 35. This one has almost like a different texture to the blur than the Sweet 35 does. And this one has an additional aperture. You can shoot wide open at f2, whereas the Sweet 35 starts at 2.5, so a half a stop brighter. But they are comparable in look as far as that tack sharp sweet spot surrounded by blur. So this optic kit is for the creative photographer, like probably the ultimate tool. It comes with 3 different optics, and you're going to get the single glass optic, the plastic optic, and the Pinhole Zone plate all in one kit. And so it's basically like having 3 additional lenses. The single glass optic is a single non-coated element. So because it's a single element, it's a little bit softer. It's a little bit less sharp. It's got no coating, so you're going to get diffusion. You're going to get chromatic aberration. A lot of the things that a lot of the lenses don't want you to have, we're kind of trying to embrace that with a more primitive optic. This one is a favorite of fine art photographers and black and white. I've also seen some really great infrared images, either shot with filters or shot with a converted camera. Because it's kind of like an antique lens, it really appears to fine art photographers, and you can see that the sweet spot is pretty sharp, but it's not quite as sharp as the Sweet 35. It's not supposed to be because it's got that single glass optic, and the lack of coating gives you a little diffusion in some cases more than others. But even stopping it down to f8, you're going to get a pretty large sweet spot, but it's always going to have that kind of old worldy, antique-y look to it, like this one. Popular for black and white. It's very sort of softer and more forgiving for portraits as far as that dreamier look for it. Takes away, it's not going to be as sharp as, say, the double glass or the Sweet 35. So if you want a softer look for a portrait, the single glass is the way to go. You can see the diffusion in this one. Also, you'll get chromatic aberration with it, so it does things to your colors, which is really interesting, makes it a little bit more random. Plastic optic, one of my favorites. It's a lot like a Diana or a Holga. It's not sharp, it's not supposed to be. Wide open, it's very, very soft and dreamy, very ethereal, very impressionistic. Stopping it down is going to give you a really nice sweet spot that you can definitely see the sweet spot versus the blur, but that sweet spot has its own quality. It's more like a Holga or a Diana camera. Changing your aperture, again, will make the sweet spot bigger, but still it's never going to be quite as sharp as the single glass or the double glass or the Sweet 35. It's really supposed to be softer, dreamier. Sometimes, like if you look at the image on the right, it almost looks like those flowers are glowing. I think it's one of my favorite because it's just so different than a normal lens. Some black and whites. I think these were taken in Laos. Yes, these are digital. And these are all basically straight out of the camera. I mean, some of them have had some color balancing and sharpening, but there's no effects done in post with these. These are, basically straight out of the Lensbaby. Another black and white with the plastic. And this one, I mean, you can totally see the details and you can tell what you're looking at, but it's always going to be that much softer than any of the others. Then there's the Pinhole Zone plate. Now this one is actually 2-in-1 almost, because you're getting a pinhole, a f177 pinhole, and then you can switch the little switch inside over to zone plate, and it's an f19 zone plate. If you're not familiar with the zone plate, it's kind of like a pinhole in that it's not an optic. It's just a hole that you're shooting through. But the zone plate actually has concentric circles inside that refract the light, so you can see. And this one, the left one is a zone plate, and the right one is a pinhole. You can see that glow in the left one, how different it looks than the zone plate. And you can often see the rings around your points of light, like if you shoot traffic lights or if you shoot the sun, you can actually see those rings around the light source, which is pretty cool. That's probably the one I use the least, simply because I never carry a tripod, and at f177 it's tricky to hand hold. The zone plate I do okay hand holding, but usually with pinhole at f177 you want some sort of stabilization for your camera, because it's going to move around otherwise. It's really cool though when your subject moves around, like if the trees sway, you kind of capture that motion in a long exposure as well. Infinite depth of field. The nice thing about our pinhole too is that it is covered in the back, so you're not going to let any dust into your sensor. A lot of people that are intrigued by pinhole are concerned about letting dust into their sensor by using like a body cap with a hole in it or something. This, you don't have that issue because it's covered in the back. This is an example of you can see those rings there from the sunset around the zone plate. And that glow is also caused by the zone plate, by the circles. Soft focus. This one is actually sold separately, and it is a 50 millimeter optic. It's a flat field optic, so with this one you're not getting a sweet spot. With this one you're getting the same image quality from corner to corner. This one has the magnetic aperture discs, but it also comes with 3 custom apertures. Like you can see there in the image, the multiple holes. They're kind of like the old Imagon lenses, if you're familiar with those. Those multiple hole apertures, they diffuse the light basically as it comes in, and that's what helps it makes the image softer. So it's really popular for portraits, but it's also popular for nature photography and for flowers. There's some incredible flower photography. If you look up Kathleen Clemens, she does a lot with the soft focus and flowers. And then
Cuba?
This is Cuba, yes. Yeah, Jerry Hart, he's from Portland, and he did some really nice shots in Cuba, both street scenes and portraits with the soft focus. But different because it doesn't have a sweet spot, you're getting that same kind of even look from corner to corner. These you'll also sometimes see a glow of the whites. The whites will glow, brighter colors will glow a little bit. And the nice thing about this is all just done in one click of the camera. Any of these shots, there's really no hours and hours and hours spent in post. It's one click of the camera, and fisheye. So we have a couple of fisheye options. We have the fisheye optic that is available separately, and you can put that into your composer or whichever Lensbaby you have, or you can buy the Scout, and the Scout comes with the fisheye in it. The difference between the Scout and the composer is that the Scout doesn't move around, it stays centered, so it holds your optic centered, which is great for the fisheye because the fisheye doesn't really benefit from being moved around. If you were to put the fisheye into the composer, you would straighten it out and tighten the ball so it doesn't move and just shoot straight on. I mean, there's no rules, you can move it around, but most people would like to have it centered. And it's a 12 millimeter optic, and it's the only one that really is going to look different between full frame and a crop sensor. So on the full frame cameras, you're going to see a full image circle, but as you go to a crop sensor, you're going to basically have a little vignette around the edges, but it covers the whole sensor. These are all full frame, and you can see, like on that image on the right, you get this unique Lensbaby flare inside the barrel of the optic. In some cases like this, it's the sun that's making it glow white, but in other instances where you have a colorful light, you're going to see a colorful glow inside the barrel of the optic. So like this one, you can see this one is a crop sensor image. You can tell by the vignette around the edges, and you can see that blue glow around the edges is coming from the blue light at the end of the tunnel. Here's another one where you see that little glow around the outside from the snow. This is what it's going to look like tomorrow. This one also crop sensor. This is taken on a Canon 40D. And you can see that sun has created that flare around the edges on the inside of the barrel. Another full frame image. And some people like these one way and some people like the other. It's really up to your sensor to decide as far as the look that you get. Here's a comparison shot. A Canon 40D on the right, on the left, and on the right is a 5D. So you can see the difference of what it looks like between two cameras.
Are these mounts integrated into the, we'll call it the optic, so that you use aperture setting, or do you shutter? What is your, in other words, it's a meter?
Metering depends on the camera, but most cameras will work in aperture priority mode or manual mode, and the meter will work. They don't, there's no electronics in the Lensbaby, so your camera is always going to say F dash dash or FOO because it's not reading the aperture. But basically the way it works is you set the ISO on the camera, you set the aperture on the Lensbaby according to the effect that you want, more or less sharpness or blur, and then you set your shutter speed accordingly. In aperture priority mode, for example, all the Canons work perfectly in aperture priority mode. It'll meter for you perfectly and set the shutter speed for you. In manual mode, you set the shutter speed yourself. I recommend shooting the Edge 80 in manual mode because sometimes when you tilt it, it does aperture priority mode doesn't quite calculate it right. And then there's a few of the entry-level Nikon cameras where there's no metering at all. You just have to guess. So anything below the D200, I think, is you're going to have to guess your shutter speed. So the 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, you have to guess. And then the new ones like the 5000 and 6000, you have to guess. The 7000 works in aperture priority mode. So Nikon's, there's a chart on the website where you can find that information, but basically aperture priority mode or manual mode will work. And then basically setting your ISO is easy. And then your shutter speed, even if you are working with a Nikon camera that has no meter at all, it just takes a little bit of practice to get the hang of guessing your shutter speed and taking a test shot and then going from there. And the more you do it, the better you become at it. The Spark is the newest Lensbaby body. It's our entry-level product, and it has what we call the Spark optic in it, which is only available in the Spark. It's similar in effect and sharpness to the double glass, but it's a little bit different. It has a fixed aperture, and with the Spark actually has limited tilt, so you can't tilt it far enough so that you move your sweet spot off the sensor. That's part of the entry-level design to make it easier. But really nice, crisp, sharp sweet spot, surrounded by blur. It's kind of the same design as the original Lensbaby and the 2.0 and the Muse, the squishy in and out to focus, hold it in place while you shoot. A little bit more random and spontaneous.
What would you say the difference is between that and the Sweet?
Well, first of all, aperture control. Sorry, I guess you can't hear. Yeah, the question was, what's the difference between the Spark optic and the Sweet 35? First one would be aperture control. The Sweet 35 has a built-in aperture that ranges from 2.5 to f/22. The Spark optic is 5.6. Can't change it. And then focal length. The focal length is 35 on the Sweet 35, and it's 50 on the Spark optic.
Now, most of these shots we've seen, are they on a tripod, or is it?
I would say that they're all handheld except for the pinhole and zone plate, possibly. But the rest of them are pretty much all handheld. Like, I never use a tripod, never. I'll try and do a pinhole handheld. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I never use a tripod with it, and I shoot with it every day. So for accessories, we have accessory lenses that are going to screw onto the front of the optics. And so with those, you can basically change your focal length, go from 50 to 30, from 50 to 80, from 50 to 22 by screwing on the accessories. We also have macro accessory lenses that screw onto the front. And then we have creative apertures. And these guys are designed for these little cup optics that look like this. So those are single glass, plastic, pinhole, the soft focus, and the double glass. We'll take these accessories. The Sweet 35, Edge 80, and Fisheye, don't take them. The Fisheye, there's no reason to screw anything onto the front of it. But the Sweet 35 and the Edge 80, the fronts are 46 millimeters. So there is a little bit of compatibility to learn there as far as the accessories are concerned. But they are available for double glass, single glass, plastic, pinhole, soft focus. So the super wide will take any of those optics from a 50 to a 21. It kind of adds a little enhancement to the blur. You also sometimes get a little bit of color shifting to it, sometimes a little bit of fringing, sometimes a little bit of barrel distortion. These guys will vignette pretty quickly on a full frame if you give it a lot of tilt. Usually on a full frame you're going to want to shoot pretty much straight on or just with a tiny bit of tilt, but on a crop sensor you can tilt it a lot more. And the super wide is actually sold separately. The other guys are sold in a kit called the Accessory kit. This is a super wide example. This is the double glass optic with the super wide screwed onto the front. It's going to give you a wider angle of view, and you can totally tell the fall off there around the edges is different than the double glass by itself. There's almost a little bit of distortion there in the corners. Macro converters, these are easy because they're compatible with all the optics. It's almost like an extension tube. It goes in between the lens body and the optic. So you would take your optic out, put your macro converters in, and then put your optic back in. They're 18 millimeter, and 16 millimeter, so they can use separately or you can use them together. And basically will convert any of your Lensbaby optics into macro. You can get within an inch of your subject when you're using the, like say, for example, the Sweet 35 and the macro converters, or the double glass and the macro converters, you can get that close. And I do have some comparison shots too.
Can you use that with the macro lens?
Yes, yes. So we'll get to the macro kit, which are the screw-on macro lenses. Those guys you can use with the macro converters on the optics that take the macro kit, because the macro kit doesn't go on the Sweet and the Edge. So here's some examples with Edge 80 and the macro. These are all, actually Kathleen Clemens teaches classes, Lensbaby classes on PPSOP website that are pretty impressive, the work that they turn out. She's got people all over the country crawling around in the bushes, taking pictures of flowers and bugs, and lots of flowers though, lots of nature. So here's a comparison shot with the macro kit and the macro converters. And I think this is in the catalog, but it's also on the website too if you want to take a closer look of how close you can get. Wedding photographers love our macro kits and converters for the detail shots, for the rings, for the flowers, for those kind of things. Also commercial photographers and nature photographers, I think, are our biggest customers for the macro converters or kit. So these are the contents of the accessory kit. With the accessory kit, you get a whole box of great stuff. You get a wide angle, a telephoto, you get the macro kit, which are the screw-on lenses, and then you get the creative apertures. So it's really a great variety that really adds a lot more to what you already have with your double glass, for example. So double glass is 50 millimeters. You screw on the wide, and it's going to make it a 30 millimeter. This wide, the 0.6x wide, is optimized so that it doesn't shrink your sweet spot. It keeps it just as sharp. It's just making it a little bit wider, going from 50 to 30. And again, these will screw onto the double glass, the single glass. This is a single glass example. Plastic pinhole soft focus. The telephoto kind of lets you zoom in. It's a 1.6, so it takes the 50 millimeter optics from a 50 to an 80, and you're able to zoom in a little closer to your subject. So for this one, he actually used the macro filter and the telephoto stacked. It's another single glass example. So these, you get two lenses. It's a +4 and a +10, and they're stackable. Like the macro converters is a 8 millimeter and a 16 millimeter, and they're stackable. This is an example of the differences with just the +4, just the +10, and then stacked. You can get an idea there of how close you get when they're stacked. Creative Aperture Kit, this is really fun. These are shaped discs that you drop into the magnetic aperture system. So double glass, single glass, plastic, and soft focus. And you're going to see those shapes in your out of focus highlights. Sometimes it looks like this one is the slashy one, the one that's in the bottom corner. And this one is almost making it look like a textured background. But in many cases, you actually see the stars or the shapes. Like if you shoot lights like Christmas lights or traffic lights, the light will actually turn into a star or a heart or whatever shape you put in there. It's pretty magical. So these you can see the stars in the background there. The dewdrops is changed into stars. It's more subtle in this example. Step-up shade. This is for also the 37 millimeter threaded optics, and it takes it up to 52. So you can attach a 52 millimeter threaded filter to the front of your Lensbaby. By no means are filters required, but a lot of people have filters and like to use filters. A lot of people like to use more creative filters like star filters and things like that with the Lensbaby, but also polarizers and neutral density filters are popular too. And this allows you to use 52 millimeter threaded filters on the front of any of those optics. Double glass, single glass, plastic, soft focus. So these are examples of a polarizer on the left and on the right. Star filter was the previous one. And then kits. These are the couple of kits that we have made up and available. These are available for Nikon and Canon. I mean, all the contents are available for any lens, but the way we have the kits made up, they're just for Nikon and Canon. So the Pro Effects kit is going to give you the Composer Pro with the Suite 35. You get the Edge 80 optic. You get the macro converters. You get a nice big cleaning cloth, and then it all comes together in the system bag. That is part of the Lensbaby Edge 80 rebate program right now because it's got the Edge 80 in it. You can get a $30 mail-in rebate on the Pro Effects kit right now, which is a great deal. And then the Creative Effects kit leans more towards the creative side. It has the Composer Pro with the double glass optic in it, and then it has the contents of the Optic kit with single glass, plastic, and pinhole, and then it also has the contents of the Accessory kit. So with that, you get the wide, the tele, the creative aperture, and the system bag. So you're really getting a whole bag of tricks there in the creative effects kit. There's also a couple of books out that are actually not in this presentation, but there's volume 1 of the Corey Hill's book on Lensbaby, and there's now a new volume 2 available. Both are great full color books that kind of explain the system and give you ideas and tips and tricks on how to use it. And they actually have a special right now with purchase of a composer, you get a free volume 1 book, which is pretty cool. Really helps give you ideas. And then this basically is an invitation to the website. I don't know if you've ever been to lensbaby.com, but there's more than all this that I've just shown you image-wise on the website. There's a gallery for each optic. There's all the product specs and all that stuff. There's compatibility charts for everything, what goes with what doesn't go with what. There's the macro charts that show you what the macro kits do. There's a whole video section with both instructional videos of how-tos, how to use this, how to change the optic, how to do that, and then how to make your own creative apertures, how to do just basically anything you want to do Lensbaby in video. Some of them are short and sweet, some of them are a little bit longer and more detailed. And then there's also some inspirational videos on there that have photographers in the field talking about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And that's all on lensbaby.com. So these are just some fun shots that I took around New York in my visits over the years. This one is obviously the fisheye. This one taken on a crop sensor. This is the plastic optic in Coney Island. I believe that's all gone now, is it? Some of it's still there. So I went, it was October, because it was after Photo Plus Expo, and it was freezing cold, but it was bright and sunny, and it was fairly desolate. So I did quite a few shots with the plastic optic. You can see the kind of softness. You see the sweet spot there, but you can't really, it's not like sharp and crisp like the double glass. That's how you can tell the difference between plastic and any of the others. This one also has a creative aperture in it. If you see over here in the corner, see that's just like a glint of light, and it's picked up that creative aperture. Oftentimes with a creative aperture, if you have like a kind of a flat background, if you take a picture of someone against a wall like this, you're not going to see the shape of the aperture until you get a glint of light like that. In some cases, it's more obvious than others. But these are all from Coney Island, obviously. Plastic. There you can see, there on the right side, you can just see a shape from the creative aperture there. Through the fence. And I go all over the place. I don't even pack my straight lens. It just bores me. I just find that Lensbaby is so much more interesting, and the images are that much more dynamic. And to me, it's more of a challenge than just waving your camera around. It's like, as we say, see in a new way, but you really do kind of see things in a different way. After you've been shooting with a Lensbaby, you start to look at different details. And your everyday, like David said earlier, you could walk down the street 100 times. Every day of your life, you walk down the street. You may have photographed that street before, but when you put your Lensbaby on, you're like, wow, look at that. Oh, look at this. And you start to see different angles and different perspectives of things. It really kind of helps you get out of a creative rut if you're in one. I like to do self-portraits, usually like in mirrors and reflections. It's Chinatown. Now this is Suite 35. These are also Suite 35 down near Chinatown.
What is that one?
That one is Suite 35 in the dark, Times Square. It's the flea market in Hell's Kitchen. This is Suite 35. It's also Hell's Kitchen, I think. Yep. Times Square, Suite 35 again.
How do you do the miniaturization effect, the look? And why does it look so amazing to the eye? I mean,
I don't know, it's kind of like the,
model.
yeah, it looks like a toy village. And you can kind of emulate that look with the double glass or the Suite 35, but more so with the Edge 80 you get that look. And it is very appealing. I mean, people buy $1,000 tilt shift lens to be able to do that. But you can do it a lot less expensively with the Lensbaby. There was that one shot that was in the step-up shade gallery of the red building that looked like a toy. It's pretty intriguing. I took some actually last night of out the window of the hotel down towards the river and just around the view from the 36th floor over here. And obviously it's going to look smaller because you're up on the 36th floor looking down than if you're just like one floor up looking down. But it looks like a toy village.
And you can do video with these.
Yeah, video is really popular with Lensbaby. There's a whole section on our website of videos. There's music videos, there's commercials, there's major motion pictures that have been shot with the Lensbaby. More recently, Contagion was shot with the Lensbaby, and that was a movie about a virus, and right before everybody died, their world went wacky and in and out of focus, and that part was shot with the Lensbaby. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly was shot with the Lensbaby also, and that was when a guy woke up from a coma and he looks around the room and everybody goes in and out of focus. That was Lensbaby. But you start to see it a lot on TV and commercials and lots of music videos. There's Motley Crue videos, there's some country videos, there's, God, I can't even remember all the music videos that are out with Lensbaby. And it's been used on TV shows. It was used on CSI Las Vegas. It was used on, like, I think a whole episode of House was shot with it, but then there were a couple other shots from House that were used with the Lensbaby. So either with, we do make a PL mount Lensbaby for movie cameras, but video cameras that shoot, DSLRs that shoot video, you can use the Lensbaby on there and get some really fun dynamic stuff. And all in camera. I mean, you know, people are spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in post trying to add effects that you can do right in camera with the Lensbaby. This is soft focus, this image. So you can see corner to corner, it's the same effect. They got mixed up. We went back to Coney Island all of a sudden. Here's Fisheye of Chinatown. This is crop sensor, Canon 40D. That's the man, Craig Strong, shopping in Chinatown. Now we're going back to around town with Suite 35 Optic, plastic Optic. This is Chelsea. This is definitely the plastic Optic. Some of them scream more than others, you know, which one which one it was. Plastic optic. You can see that wacky rainbow flare thing coming out of there. That's just Lensbaby magic. That's our little mascot. He goes with us everywhere.
That's a plastic?
That's the plastic optic, yeah. And this has got the star aperture. See the star right over? This is plastic also. Plastic. Plastic. Can you tell I like the plastic optic? I believe this is plastic and super wide. Now there, the star is definitely more obvious. That's the plastic with the star aperture. And so those lights have all turned into stars. Same shot with the fisheye. I think that was out the window of Tiffany's. It's down in Chelsea, I think. And then some from the Highline fisheye. Another fisheye of the Highline. And that one I had to include. That's from our last session here with Gabe. And then when we went to the Met, because we tried to do a photo walk in Central Park, but I brought another suitcase full of rain with me, so we had to go inside and go to the Met. So we shot a little bit in the Met. This is a fisheye again, inside the Met. Central Park, the only dry spot in Central Park, under the bridge. And we all know where that is.
Is
Then-
the fisheye giving you soft focus? Like the one back there just seems very, very in focus.
No, it is sharp, corner to corner. It should be sharp. There's no like sharpness and blur to it. It's sharp. You get distortion around the edges, but it's not selective focus. This is back to the plastic, back to Coney Island. And I think that's the end of that. So I don't know if you brought cameras with you, but I have 2 cameras. If you want to put your hands on one, really would invite you to try one out. Just pick it up and look through it. I have all the optics. I have all the accessories. I also have a couple of iPads. You can go through the iPads and look at the images. And then questions, if anybody has questions.
I'm trying to understand the difference between the Composer and the Composer Pro.
Okay.
And it looks like the Composer Pro, you have a minimum focus that's closer.
That's depends on the optic. So
Oh, I see.
the Composer Pro with the Suite 35 has a closer minimum focusing distance. The Composer Pro double glass and Composer Pro
I see, okay.
and Composer have the same double glass optic. The difference between Composer Pro and Composer is the materials that it's made out of. So the Composer Pro is all anodized aluminum, but the Composer is plastic. It's a nylon material. The mount is metal, but the rest of it is plastic. So you feel a much smoother focusing feel with the Composer Pro, and also much more fine tuning on the fine focus is much smoother also.
And the Muse is the one where you push it.
You squeeze in and out to focus, and then you have to hold it in place with your fingertips when you shoot. Once you let go, it's gone.
And what would make someone choose a Composer or Composer Pro versus a Muse?
Price is one factor. Some people just like the fact that the Muse is just so completely different than anything else. It's, you squeeze in and out to focus, you hold it in place while you shoot. It's definitely a lot more random and spontaneous, but every shot is a one of a kind. Whereas with the Composer and the Composer Pro, your shots are repeatable. You can set it up and it will hold its position, and you can find focus it, and you can take the same shot over and over again. It's not as easy to repeat your shot with the Muse or the Spark. It's also not as easier to shoot in lower light because you're totally trusting your fingertips to find that point of focus. With the Composer, you're just able to eyeball it and just leave it exactly where you have it. With the Muse, in a lower light situation, it's a lot trickier to get the hang of it. I'd say the learning curve is a little higher on the Muse than the Composer Pro. They're a little bit more intuitive. You just basically point them where you want them, and they stay, and then you can find focus.
Yeah. Does the sensor size affect the sweep spot?
No, it's mainly with what you're doing if you're cutting out the blur. So if you take the same shot on a full frame and a crop sensor, your sweet spot's going to appear bigger because it's taking up more of the photo, but you're cutting the edges out. Really, the only like big difference you're going to see is with the fisheye optic. That's going to give you a much bigger difference in what you're getting.
For more information, please visit us online, give us a call, or stop by our New York City Superstore. You can also connect with us on the web.